July meeting of the Overview and Audit Committee of Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes Fire Authority. I would like to start by confirming that this meeting is being live streamed on the Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service YouTube channel. Following the meeting, a recording will continue to be available on this channel, and it is also being recorded should there be any technical difficulties. I'd just like to remind members of 3 key points. First, please mute the microphone when not speaking. Secondly, feel free to turn off the camera function and turn off incoming video. This may also help if you have a weak connection. Be careful not to click on the telephone icon, as this will terminate your connection. If members have a raise your hand function, this and/or the conversation or chat function can be used to request to speak. The fallback option will be to indicate in the traditional manner. Requests to speak will be monitored and brought to the Chairman's attention before inviting a member to speak. For the benefit of viewers of the webcast, I shall now read the roll call of committee members' names in surname alphabetical order. Please unmute in response when your name is called. Councillor Carroll is here.
Here.
Councillor Christensen.
Here.
Councillor Cole.
Here.
Councillor Exxon.
Present.
Councillor Hussain. You might need to unmute, Councillor.
I had on the mute. Here.
Thank you. Councillor Mallon.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mills.
Present.
Councillor Minns.
Present.
Councillor Stutchbury.
Present.
Thank you. Thank you, members. The first item of business is the election of chairman. As the former vice chairman of the committee is no longer on the authority, it falls on me to preside over the election. Are there any nominations for the position of chairman for the year 2020-2021?
Councillor Cole, I would like to propose Councillor David Carroll as chairman, please.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that nomination?
I will second that proposal.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other nominations? There being no other seconded nominations, I can confirm that Councillor Carroll is duly elected as chairman by silent assent. Congratulations, Chairman.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for attending today, and thank you for making me chairman. Can we move on to the appointment of a vice chairman? I'll leave that to you, Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. Are there any nominations for the position of vice chairman for the year 2020-2021?
Yes, this is Councillor Mills. I'd like to propose Councillor Wendy Mallon, please.
Is there a seconder for that nomination?
I would like to second that proposal.
Are there any other nominations? There being no other seconded nominations, I can confirm that Councillor Mallon is duly elected as vice chairman.
Thank you very much, and
Well done.
Well done, Wendy. Thank you very much. Right, can we move on to apologies, please, Katie?
There's none, Chairman.
Okay. Right, agenda 4. I believe you all got everything correct in front of you. I hope it's going to be working well for you, the agenda. It's a very long agenda, so can we move on to the minutes of the last meeting? I was present at the meeting, so I confirm that they seem to be okay with me, but I think Councillor Exman was there as well. So if there's no other objections, could I say the minutes are okay and correct? Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, agreed.
That's carried, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, the declarations of interest. Can I ask everybody, if you've got any declarations of interest? I'll take that as a no. Right, questions?
None,
Katie?
Chairman.
Right, okay. Item 7, the RIPA policy. Can I hand this over to you, Grant?
Thank you, Chairman. For newer members onto the authority, RIPA stands for the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. And this pertains to Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes Fire Authority because as an enforcing and prosecuting authority for breaching fire safety legislation, the authority has powers to conduct covert surveillance. Following an inspection by the Surveillance Commissioner in 2016, it was recommended by the inspector that elected members be apprised on a regular basis on the use of these powers. So this is a standing item, a quarterly item. We have never had recourse to those powers, but this is to apprise members according with the Surveillance Commissioner's recommendations.
Okay, any observations or questions on that one? Take that is a no. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 8, and it's item 8A, and it's internal audit reports, final reports. So I can hand swiftly on to Maggie Gibb. Move from there, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm actually going to pass straight over to Selina Harlock, who's the audit manager, who's been responsible for the delivery of the audit work to the authority. So Selina will take you through the papers, and I can support with any questions at the end. Thank you very much. So can we move on with that? Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So firstly, I'll take you through the final audit reports for 1920. So these are the last two that members have not seen since the last meeting. The first one is the core financial controls audit and the performance management audit. So firstly, I'll take you through the core financials, and that is from page 21. Our assurance opinion for this audit was substantial. There were no material weaknesses identified from our review. We have raised 3 audit findings, which are low priority, and I can just take you through the detail of what those are in relation to. The first one was regarding purchase orders, where we had orders that were raised retrospectively, i.e. the invoice was received and that triggered for the purchase order then to be raised. The second finding was in relation to credit notes. Our finding was that there was insufficient details explaining the reasons why those credit notes were raised on customer accounts. And lastly, the third finding was in relation to payroll, where we had voluntary deductions that didn't have supporting documentation on the employee files. So all those findings have been raised with management, and action is being taken, and we'll monitor that through our normal follow-up process. I suppose I can take any questions now with regard to that report before I move on to the next one.
Thanks very much. Any questions? I'd say that is a okay. So do you want me to read the recommendation out, Graham?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, there is a recommendation, and I must say there's lots of paperwork here, so please say if you can't identify the paperwork as we go along this meeting. Right, the recommendation is raised in the finalised internal audit report be noted. Is that agreed?
That's carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'll talk you through Appendix B, which is the Performance Management Audit Report. And this is on page 40 of your papers. So the audit evaluated the controls in place for the corporate performance management framework, data quality, risk management, and performance management. Our opinion for this audit was reasonable assurance. We had 2 medium priority findings and 2 low priority findings that were raised. And these were in relation to the balance scorecard. The second was in relation to the council tax performance measure. And third was regarding the customer satisfaction performance measure. And lastly, with regard to the risk management policy. All the findings in this, again, have been agreed with management, and we'll be tracking progress against these actions as part of our follow-up procedure.
Okay, there is a question. Councillor Christensen. A question.
Thank you, Chairman. One question and one observation, please. On page 45, we note that the risk management policy should have been updated in January 2018. Wasn't done, as now planned for 2021. Was there a reason it wasn't done, or rather than just saying it wasn't done, what's the background to it? And my observation was regarding finding 2, the corporate performance framework, council tax performance measure. I just want to say I do support the recommendation to remove that as a measure. I don't think it's been helpful in the management of the service. I think it's taken us down a bit of a blind alley. So yeah, good to see it removed.
Thank you. Do you want to reply to that at all, or not? Or was that an observation? Is she there? The officer?
I think with the question relating to the risk management policy, perhaps Stuart Gowanlock, who's responsible for that policy, might be able to make comment as to the reason behind it not being updated since 2015.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, in relation to that one, it's simply just a question of resourcing and capacity. We have, when I say it's not been reviewed, it hasn't been subject to a formal review, but we kind of desktop reviewed it, and I mean fundamentally it's still in line with the alarm good practice guidance in relation to risk management. So we don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with it, and it was simply lots of other things taking high priority.
Right, thank you for that. There's another question, Councillor Stutsbury.
Thank you, Chairman. It's more of an observation than a question, Chairman, but they might, because you've all been on it longer than me, you'll be able to respond more appropriately, probably. We're still, Appendix 1, page 89, we're still in this late day discussing gender pay gap report. I did ask a question once before, and you're doing an ongoing work. What I don't understand is, and that's my ignorance for not being on the authority, is why we still have a gender pay gap. Is there a good reason for that, or is it something historical people have been addressing and it's never been addressed?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is actually in this paper.
That's item 9.
So that's item 9. It's an item 9 item actually. So can we move on to that later on?
I'll take that question later, Chairman. I apologise. It's a lot of paperwork here.
I know. I did actually I did say at the start of the meeting, you will get lots of paperwork with this because it's a very complex matter. So thanks for that. We can bring up the next question. Thank you for that. Okay, if there's no other questions, can I give a recommendation? And it's
sorry, I think Wendy.
David,
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Wendy, you're next. Thank you.
Yeah. About performance benchmarking, isn't there a danger that if everyone's doing well, that's fine, but if everyone's doing mediocre or badly, then everybody feels they're doing well because they're the same? So isn't there a potential problem that when people want to try something beneficial to get better, if you understand what I'm saying, it's possibly a way of just being a bit complacent rather than being innovative, if you're all doing well against each other, etc., etc. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think I do, yeah. So is there an answer to this?
It's to my blank initiative.
If we haven't got an answer at the moment, we can come back with a written answer later on, can't we? So, yeah. So I think we note the question, Wendy, and we'll come back with a written answer later on. Is that okay? Thank you. Right. Going back to the recommendation, it's recommended that members review and note the contents of our annual report. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chairman.
Right, I'll give you time to. I do appreciate there's lots of paperwork. So item 9 now, annual government statement. Okay, Graham.
Sorry, Chair. We still have one paper, that's 8B, so the internal audit annual audit report to present.
That's right. Yeah, carry on.
Okay, thank you. So this is on your paper packs, pages 59 on. So the purpose of this report is to outline the internal audit work undertaken by the Internal Audit Service for the year ending 31st of March 2020. The audit and account and audit regulation requires the Fire Authority to maintain an adequate and effective internal audit service in accordance with proper internal audit practices. The SIPFA Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, which set out our proper practice for internal audit, requires the Chief Internal Auditor to provide an annual report to those charged with governance, which should include an opinion on the overall adequacy of the internal control framework. It should be noted that internal audit is not responsible for the control system. It is management's responsibility to develop and maintain the internal control framework and to ensure compliance. It is, however, the responsibility of internal audit to form an independent opinion on the adequacy of the system of internal control. So based on the audit work undertaken, our experience and knowledge of previous year's performance and the current climate in which the authority is operating, it is the Chief Internal Auditor's opinion that the system of internal control provides reasonable assurance regarding the effective, efficient and economic exercise of the authority's functions. It should be noted also that the Chief Internal Auditor does not imply that internal audit has reviewed all risks relating to the Fire Authority. The most that we can do is to provide the accountable officers and the committee is that we have reasonable assurance that there are no major weaknesses in the control processes. The matters raised in this report are only those which came to our attention during our internal audit work and are not necessarily a comprehensive statement of all the weaknesses that exist and or are they all the improvements that may be required by the authority. In arriving at our opinion, we have taken into account the results of the audit work undertaken in the year 1920, the progress for follow-up of previous audit actions raised, any limitations to the scope and the work undertaken. And as I push through in the body of the report, I will just jump through the key headlines. So in the report, we include in there our performance for the current year. There's table 7.3, page 64, that gives a detail of how we have performed as an internal audit service. You'll note this year that we have 80% results in terms of our turnaround timing, and this is in relation to the last two audit reports that we present to the committee, and that was due to the resource within our service being redeployed to support the COVID response. Just to make you aware, again, these were communicated to management and any delays, and we have been communicating with our progress continuously. Appendix 1 from pages 66. This gives the detail of all the audits that we've undertaken this year with details of the opinions and the findings. And again, these were presented to the committee along with what we've presented today. So they're not new to you all or not to everyone. And Appendix 2, which is page 69, is the current status of the audit actions that we've been following up. So this is representing how responsive management are in implementing the findings that we've raised. We've provided a detail of what the open actions are as well as we stand. So for pages 70, we have a summary of the actions that are still in progress as outstanding. On page 73, to members that are new, we've also provided definitions of the assurance opinions. So if you have any questions, we tend to have these as part of our audit reports. We have a summary of the opinions. And if you have need any more detailed explanations, again, this is available to you. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a question, Councillor Stutsbury.
Thank you, Chairman. First, it's page 869. It's an observation. I don't truly understand that chart because I haven't seen these, the pie chart, because I'm not used to the flow of these things. I don't understand when I look at that what that actually means, and I apologise if that's my fault. And the other thing is on page 70. It's got on the bottom of the page, it says low risk authority are not able to hold events. Now, there might be an easy explanation for that, but the other matter which on page 72, which you've ranked quite high, you're finding staff requirements to undertake assessment checks. Now, though I read that and it says with Red Kite, am I believing Red Kite's, correct me if I'm wrong, as a housing association? And it really concerned me that the housing association, if that's true, are not completely cooperating with the fire authority. I think I think all members would be concerned that people in a housing association aren't cooperating with the fire authority. And it looked, it stood out at me as something that you've quite rightly flagged up as a concern. And we've just said earlier, you've got powers to enforce. Will they be taken up? Because some of these people will probably be some of the most economically and vulnerable people the fire service provide a service to. And that's a bit of a long question, I apologise, but it just flagged up to me as being quite serious.
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I think Mark's going to come in to answer that one.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Suchley, for your question. Red Kite is the name of Housing Association, but it also happens to be the name of our system we use to keep track of our stores assets. So it's just a coincidental name. So it relates to a recommendation around stores, and it's nothing to do with a housing association in this instance.
Okay.
That's a relief.
Yes. So we got another question from Councillor Cole.
My question's just been answered, actually, but thank you.
Right, Selina.
Okay, so with response to the question from Councillor Statuary on page 69, the pie chart, it might be helpful to explain how our audit process works and sort of why we present this, because you will be seeing this at each audit committee that we present our papers. So following a completion of an audit report, when we raise our audit actions, we populate these into an action tracker. So we track how they're progressing the implementation of the identified actions in line with the agreed dates. So at the point of which the implementation dates lapse, we start reporting that as being overdue. So you will see on your chart, you have 5 actions that are overdue. That means they haven't completed them in line with the agreed timescales. Those that are completed are the audit recommendations that we raised and have been completed on time. So they're therefore green. And those that are completed late, again, they've been completed. However, they didn't complete them in line with the timescales that we'd agreed. And what we then do is give the detail of those that are overdue on page 70 and on.
Chairman, I put down Q, but I'm not being
I couldn't backtrack them in the
Robin,
chart.
Robin, just please. I mean, we're talking across each other. So good explanation, Selina. Thanks for that one. Wendy, it's your question.
Thank you very much. I'm concerned about cyber security because we get a lot of attacks. And it says here that the risk is users not being aware of accountability or inappropriate use of authorities' devices. And that is one of the risks. And I want to know what you're doing about your cyber risks. Because it says you're outdated.
Yeah, I think this is one for Jerry. Jerry's going to come out on that one.
Good morning. In terms of cyber, we offer a range of training. We also have a range of procedures, and because it's such a dynamic subject area that's constantly changing and shifting around, we do monitor it very closely. We had arranged for the Southeast Regional Organised Crime Unit to come in and deliver some specific cyber training for us. COVID sort of overtook that. I was speaking to him again this morning, and we're going to arrange a venue with a couple of physical people in the room and then a lot of people via Teams, this where I'm occurring now, so that we have a bigger group, because we don't know that we can get them back again. The training is free. So we're constantly looking for packages that are out there for the training, and we are every week we read the reports that come out from the National Cyber Security Centre and look for any areas of weakness that may affect us. So in terms of things at the moment, we find, and this will come up on the risk register, we find that people are using the COVID situation just as a new environment for phishing scams. So it's more of the same, it's just a different way of doing it. So it's not new, but obviously it's something that has to be watched. And we have to look at the fact that we've got people working from home who could normally, when they're working in their works environment, would turn around to maybe ICT or a colleague and say, this looks iffy. When you're isolated alone and forced to make a quick decision, you may well make a wrong one. So the giving advice and making sure it's constantly current is something we do aim to stay very much on top of. It's unfortunate, and you will have heard so much in the news lately about incidents from Russia and China and whatever, but we still have to look at the local homegrown. And those people I used to refer to as the baby hackers, the younger people practicing their hacking skills, they've now been given the identity of script kiddies. And they just go into play, not necessarily to do harm, but can do substantial harm. So we're constantly making sure that our systems detect intrusion attempts and shut them down.
Thank you for that. That's be really important, that training, I think, and we'll look forward to that. Thanks so much. Any other questions? If not, I'll put the recommendation. It's recommended members review and note the contents of the annual report. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah. Agreed.
Sorry, Chairman.
Thanks very much. Okay, we're moving on to item 9. Everybody's got their paperwork in front of them. It's important that we're all into this one. Okay, it's the annual governance statement, and I could pass over to Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. I'm sorting out my own paperwork, except I think I'm there now. The purpose of this report is to present the draft annual governance statement 2019-2020 for approval by the committee, for signature by the chairman of the authority and its chief fire officer. The cover report starts at page 75 of your agenda pack. An annual governance statement must accompany the audited statement of accounts and must be approved in advance of the adoption of the statement of accounts. The draft annual governance statement, which starts at page 79 of your agenda pack, also contains a record of the progress against the action plan that was contained in Appendix B in last year's, that is 2018-19, annual governance statement. This progress report is at Appendix A and runs from pages 95 to 102. In the headings, there is a typo which will be corrected before publication. Appendix B, which starts at page 103, includes 4 recommendations for governance issues to be addressed in the year 2020-2021. 2 of the recommendations are vestiges of the action plan from 2019-20. The other 2 recommendations are enumerated in boxes 1 and 2 on page 103. The first recommendation is for a review and refresh of internal project and governance arrangements. The second recommendation is for a review of existing and new external partnerships, particularly in light of the new collaborative arrangements that have evolved across the Thames Valley to address health and well-being issues arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. I haven't anything further to add to the written report at this stage, Chairman, but I would be happy to take questions before you take members to the recommendations, which are at page 66.
Okay, Councillor Stutsbury.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll ask the question on the right report now. Yeah, it's just Appendix 1 and 89. The authority is still addressing pay gender gap. Well, it just seems a long time ago that legislation came in to ensure that there wasn't such a thing, and although it has been sort of explained, how bad is it, and is it a question that different people go into different employment within the authority historically, or is there something really serious there? Because it shouldn't really, I would have, in my ignorance, I wouldn't have thought we should be discussing pay gender gaps at this stage in life. I think Barbara Castle put that legislation in when I was a wee boy.
Okay, Mick, you'll come in to answer this one.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I think we need to be careful that we don't confuse equal pay with gender pay. We've been reporting on gender pay now for about 3 years when the new legislation came in, and that's based upon average earnings between males and females. And with the Fire and Rescue Services, you probably are aware from other reports, over the years we've been quite sort of heavily male dominated, so a lot of the more senior members of staff are male, so therefore we do have a gender pay gap, as most organisations do, and certainly all fire authorities do. We are working hard to reduce the gender pay gap, and year on year since we've been reporting it has improved, and we're looking to improve that even further. With regard to equal pay, we've just had an equal pay audit that's come back to the organisation just a few weeks ago, and will be presented to a future authority meeting that shows that we have absolutely no issues with equal pay. So people doing equal jobs get paid equally, whether they're male or female. So I think it's just that differential between gender pay gap reporting that we've had to report over the last 3 years due to new legislation, and equal pay, as you quite rightly say, which goes back many, many years, but we do have no issues with regard to equal pay. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robin. Any other questions? I put the recommendation. It's all 1 to 3. It's that the annual governance statement 2019 to 2020 be approved.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
That the progress of the implementation and recommendation of the previous annual governance statement, Appendix A, to the annual governance statement be acknowledged. Agreed?
Agreed.
The priorities, the 2000 to 2021 Appendix B to the annual governance statement be agreed. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much for that. Right, we're moving on to item 10, audit results report, and that's a verbal update from Alison Kennett and Neil Harris.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members of the Overview and Audit Committee. Just to introduce myself, my name's Neil Harris. I'm an associate partner in EY's Government Public Sector Assurance team based out of our Luton office. And this will be the first year in which I am EY's partner in charge for the Fire and Rescue Authority external audit. Whilst this is a verbal update, I don't know whether members of this committee have received a report from me over the past few days which summarises the progress that we've made to date on our external audit of the Fire and Rescue Authority's financial statements, and also the work on the value for money conclusion, which we agreed with the officers that would at least be circulated to you ahead of the committee. So we had an appraisal as to where we were up to on the audit.
Okay, will you move on, please?
Okay, all right. Well, all I will say at this particular point, if you have or have not had an opportunity to read the report, is that we've made some very good progress against the areas of audit risk and audit focus in the external audit plan. The audit plan that went to the last Overview and Audit Committee set out the external audit areas of risk on the audit of the financial statements and the value for money conclusion, but those particular risks were pre-COVID-19. As a result of the significant implications of the COVID-19 outbreak and the pandemic, we've had a revisit of those areas that we think would influence the financial statements in terms of key judgments from management, and areas where external audit would be focusing their attention around disclosures and judgments as at the 31st of March. So just to give you an overview of those changes from the audit plan, the first is that we've elevated the risk around the valuation of the authority's assets to a significant audit risk, and that's just to recognise that the valuers are expressing a material uncertainty on the valuation of assets in response to COVID-19. And obviously, as a Fire and Rescue Authority, you have specialised assets as well. So part of the work that we'll be doing will be reviewing the assumptions on the valuations of assets and how they're accounted for at the balance sheet date, and also the appropriateness of disclosures in the financial statements associated with material uncertainties that are expressed by your valuer and what that means for our audit report. The second area is disclosures that we're expecting all public sector entities to include in their financial statements associated with going concern. Now, there is a presumption in the CIPFA code and in FRC guidance to public sector prevent those services, to stop those services from continuing to happen. However, the auditing and accounting standards still expect entities to provide a detailed and considered disclosure on an organisation's viability, and that's their budget position looking 12 months from the date that the accounts are authorised for issue, and also the liquidity position, which looks at levels of cash, short-term investments and cash profile to continue to provide services over the next 12 months. So as part of our response and external audit, we've asked several questions of officers just to provide a documented assessment of going concern and a proposed disclosure to include in your 1920 financial statements. And I think we've made some good progress with the officers in that area. And I think it's worth saying at this stage that I do not have significant concerns on the authority's ability to operate as a going concern. And indeed, the work we've been doing on our value for money conclusion doesn't express any significant issues on the authority's financial resilience either. But I think it's important that there is a true and fair disclosure of the position in light of COVID-19 on the authority's financial position and cash position. As the only other area to flag in response to COVID-19 is that MHCLG have introduced flexibilities on the reporting timetable for 1920 financial statements and external audit this year. So in fact, the authority had until the end of August to prepare draft accounts and to make those available for public inspection. The target date for audited financial statements is the end of November. The fact that we're here on the 22nd of July, and I believe we've made very good progress on our external audit, is a testament to the authority's finance team to produce a draft set of accounts by the original timetables, to make available working papers and be responsive to audit queries during the course of the audit. And at the date of speaking to you today, I expect by the end of this week, the only areas that will be outstanding on the external audit will be the pension fund assurances that we get from the pension fund auditors for Buckinghamshire. The resolution of any outstanding queries, potentially around the audit of the valuation of assets, though we're anticipating that we will conclude that work this week, and just finalising the disclosures associated with COVID-19 in the final audited financial statements. So I'm very pleased with the progress that we've made. If I can ask the officers, if not already done so, just to circulate our report to you as a committee, just so that you're aware of that progress so far, because I think it paints a positive story about how the authority is prepared for the external audit process, how we've made decent progress ourselves before the end of July. And I'd like to get a view from this committee about how you'd like to receive the final position from myself before we issue the audit opinion. I anticipate that will probably be in September. As I say, the authority have until the end of November to publish its audited accounts. But if we're in a position by September of having concluded all of our work, then I see no reason why we can't issue our audit opinion. And I'm guided by the officers in this committee on the next steps on the governance process. The only other item that's included in our update report, but I'll probably be guided by Mark as to whether it's worth mentioning it at this stage, is the conversations I've been having around the scale fee that's set by public sector audit appointments. Now, your scale fee is £24,162. We've been making representations to PSAA now for at least the past couple of years about the increased risk and complexity of public sector financial statements and judgments that are made by public sector bodies, but also the professional and regulatory context affecting external auditors since the 2016 tender. And as a result of that, we have been putting in place a fee modelling tool this year where we've looked at all of the inputs that we think need to go into the external audit to deliver sustainable high quality, and what we believe the appropriate scale fee should be for this authority and other similar fire and rescue authorities now and in the future. And I've had a conversation with Mark as the Chief Financial Officer to set out what that proposed level is. That proposed level is £46,358. Obviously, Mark has not agreed to that position, but has taken, I think, to go to consult with the Fire Finance Network to understand what the comparative position is on proposed audit fees from all the audit suppliers, to give a considered response to this. But obviously for you as an overview and audit committee, you also need to be aware of the conversations I've been having and where I also end up on the final audit fee for the 1920 external audit. I think I'll pause at this point because I appreciate this is a verbal update for me, but there is supporting this a written report if you do wish or would welcome seeing that, which unfortunately didn't get onto your agenda papers for today. I'll look to Mark to see whether or not there's anything else I should be adding at this point, but otherwise I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, there's obviously the report will go out to, or if I haven't received it now, will go out anyway. I think it's a positive way forward, and thanks for your kind words on the way we're operating at the moment. You're talking about coming back with a report in September. Any questions from the members? Not at all. Yeah, Mark, do you want to come in now, Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to say that we're probably going to bring the final version of the audit and accounts to the November committee because we don't have a September date, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's the plan going forwards. In terms of fees, I have started surveying other fire authorities. I've had about perhaps 9 or 10 responses from various authorities across the country. And I think it's fair to say there's a mixed bag in terms of fee increases. So I'm pushing others to get a response to try and get an overall picture of where we stand in terms of fees. And obviously we'll have the conversation with E&Y and PSAA about what is a suitable level of fee going forward.
Okay, thanks for that. Any comments from members at all?
Yeah, Chairman, in view of the comments of external auditors about how well the internal finance team has performed, I think we ought to say well done to them for meeting those deadlines ahead of time in difficult circumstances.
I echo that. That's a very good suggestion. Thanks everybody for their efforts in this. It seems really positive. So the report will come back to the next meeting. Okay, thanks for that. So that's noted. Can we move on to item 11? And it's the letter of management of representation of 2019 and 20. And I believe that's you, Mark.
Marcus,
sorry. Yeah, Marcus.
Thank you, Chairman. The letter of management representation is a legislative requirement and a self-explanatory document. This paper is for noting only. In Appendix A, 107 of your packs is the letter of management representation and is signed off by the Director of Finance and Asset and Chairman of O&A. However, as stated, the Statement of Accounts 2019-20 will not be signed off today, and therefore the letter of management representation will not be signed off today. The reason provided in this annex today is remember to see the response in advance, but please bear in mind this is a draft version and subject to change. In Appendix B, 113 of your packs is the audit requirement whereby the chairman of the O&A is required to provide a response to E&Y detailing how the Overview and Audit Committee gains assurance from management. As the chairman of O&A committee has been appointed today, I will be liaising with the chairman to provide a response to E&Y. Again, this is a paper is for noting. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, there's one question. Councillor Stutesbury.
You've partly answered what I was going to ask, but it says in on page 111 it mentions appropriate funding for pensions. Well, when I read whatever day and night it was in the late hours last night, I think I saw something about we had a gap in our funding for pensions. Does the two statements coalesce, and are they sufficient in their brevity and the fact that one recognises the other? When I say that, I realise that local authorities are running deficits on pension contributions, but this statement says words like adequately funded. Well, the figures later in the report would suggest that there's a deficit. So the two things don't make sense to me. How can it be adequately funded and have a deficit? It might be just an accounting thing that I don't understand. So it's just an observation. Before signing them off, I presume you'll do a reconcile of those facts, because it doesn't show it. And if I'm being picky, I apologise. It's just this is my first audit meeting and it's stuck out at me.
Okay. Marcus?
I'm going to pass this to my colleague Asif because he'd be best to answer this question.
Yeah.
Morning, everyone. In terms of the pensions deficit, it's an accounting requirement that clearly shows what the deficit is in its current stage. The actuaries make several assumptions based on what the current position is. This is a changing position on an annual basis based on what the actuaries are looking at in terms of the data available at the time. But in terms of as we currently stand, the assumption is correct, but it is ever changing on an annual basis.
Okay. Any other questions? Robin, you look like you've got another question, Robin. Yes.
It didn't really answer the question. He says it changed on an annual basis. What I said is, how can you reconcile the accounts which show there's a fiscal deficit to the word inadequately funded? They don't make sense to me, and I'm not an accountant. I'm just a lay lad who looks at these things. That doesn't make sense to me. How can it be adequately funded and also have a deficit? Is it something that can be explained later in the meeting, or am I just nitpicking? I don't mind being told I am, but the two things you didn't answer that question, which is important. How do you reconcile it?
Right, can you just come back with an answer, please?
Councillor Sutcliffe, I think it might be something that I take outside a meeting to kind of go in a bit more detail. I don't think I've got the time available today to be able to explain how the pensions element works, but I'm happy to kind of take you through it.
Thank you very much.
We'll do that. I mean, Robin, you did say that this is a very complex situation, so you'll be happy with that, won't you? Thank you. Any other questions? I believe there's none. So this is the noting, a letter of representation be noted. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much. Right, item 12, unaudited statement of accounts year ending the 31st of March 2020.
Marcus will take it.
And now that's Marcus again.
Thank you, Chairman. As the statement of accounts 1920 will not be signed today, I want to firstly highlight the work the finance team and E&Y have done before taking you through the balance sheet seen within the statement of accounts. I know we've highlighted some of the fantastic work the finance team have done in meeting the deadline quite early, but I just want to go through that. So finance team produced and published the draft financial statements by 31st of May 2020, bearing in mind due to COVID, and as Neil mentioned, the deadline was extended to 31st of August 2020. Throughout this, the finance team were working from home and therefore not in the office with each other. Finance were willing for the final audit opinion to start on a provisional date of week commencing the 18th of May. By this date was revised by E&Y to week commencing the 8th of June, so there's a 3 weeks difference. During the field work, all the requests for information were completed in a timely fashion, considering the inability for auditors to meet the finance team on site. However, face-to-face communication would have been ideal to answer the simpler questions and to walk through the workings behind the notes of accounts on screen and in person. This has resulted in more requests being answered and therefore delays in completing the fieldwork. In terms of E&Y, it was mentioned prior to the final audit opinion taking place that resourcing wouldn't be an issue for this year's audit, and I would mostly agree with this, as this year a consistent team has been allocated to our audit. However, the team was firstly allocated 3 weeks to complete our audit, which was extended into a 4th week due to delays in completing the fieldwork. In addition, E&Y internally decided that all employees had to take leave on the 2nd and 3rd of July due to them being overworked, which has meant we lost out on 2 days during week 4. As E&Y have mentioned, there isn't a great deal of outstanding work to be done, and hopefully this will be completed soon, and obviously Neil's given a deadline of September. Throughout the final audit opinion, regular catch-ups have been made between myself, Alison and Shingy, who is the audit senior, to ensure that both parties understand how the audit is progressing and to highlight any issues found. I believe this has worked well to ensure the communication has been maintained throughout the audit opinion. And again, I just want to highlight great progress has been made throughout the audit considering the circumstances with COVID-19. Moving on to the unaudited statement of accounts. On page 40 of the statement of accounts, 158 of your packs, you will see the balance sheet. I'll give you a second just to find that.
Okay.
Yep. The balance sheet shows the value of assets, liabilities and reserves recognised by the authority as at both 31st of March 19 and 31st of March 2020. Going through this then, the authority's property portfolio across the board has seen a general drop following independent valuations carried out as at the 31st of March 2020, and this is seen within land and buildings. Assets under construction predominantly relates to the Blue Light Hub, which is at 31st of March 2020. The Blue Light Hub was still an asset under construction. Short-term investments has seen a drop to be able to meet short-term cash flow requirements, and this drop is likely to continue. Short-term investments will be highlighted through the quarterly Treasury Management Performance Reports that are brought to this committee. Short-term debtors is mainly reduced following a reduction in the pension top-up grant for 1920, which can be seen within the Firefighters Pension Fund account on page 77 of the financial statements and 195 of your packs, and also no ESMCP debtor for 1920. Within the provisions, they have overall reduced following a reversal of a provision made relating to an employment tribunal and a make use of a provision relating to injury pensions. Details behind the four main statements, which include movement in reserves, CIES, balance sheet and cash flow statement, can be found within the notes to the accounts. At this point, I'm going to stop and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, there's one question. Is Councillor Stutsbury?
Thank you, Chairman. When reading through the report, and as I say, I premised my comments in the first time I've seen it. You on page 4 of the report, which is page 122, you premise your deficit of 21.750 million, and then you on a further page you premise. I find the page. There's so many pages here, Chairman. You go through, and on page 133, page 15 of the report, you state clearly the deficit within the pension liability. Now, my earlier question was around that, and you said you'd come back to me. This is a set of accounts, and the other matter is a cursory remark, not a which can be easily answered. On page 126, the chart with who's going where with the fire service, I'm grateful to see that because I didn't know that information of who and what. And is that where the fire engines are based, who's got full-time crews and who hasn't? Because I haven't seen that information. And that is very important to see when you join an authority. So I'm thankful for that. And is that up to date, accurate and correct?
Right, Marcus, and then there'll be another question after that. Do you want to answer that one now?
Yeah, so going to your first point within the narrative statement. So within that, you see the 21.758 million. So that refers to the difference between the balance sheet compared to 19 and 1920. So that's the movement in what we spent during the year. And moving on to the pension liability, my colleague Asif said he's going to go through the report with you in more detail outside of this meeting. So he would be able to answer that difference in the pension fund liability. And in terms of the map of the organisation, that is up to date, and that is where the crews are currently based across Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes.
Nick?
Yes, sorry, just to come in on that very last point with the map of the service, Councillor Stutsbury. Obviously, the public safety plan, which is our kind of oversight document of the whole organisation, which you would have seen, I think, when we did the original members induction, contains this information as well, the most up to date. There is one slight change that's happened in the last couple of weeks since this paper, well, since the statement of accounts was produced, in that Great Holme and Bletchley, as you see at the top right of the map, are now combined at the Blue Light Hub in West Ashland. So that's the only slight change to that map at the moment, whereby that's happened since this was produced, but the rest of the map of the organisation is currently correct. And as I said, if you go to the public safety plan, that will give you more detail around how we respond to our emergencies as well. And I'm happy to take you through that on a one-to-one basis if you require.
Well, thank you for your honesty and response, and I look forward to learning more about those.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. There's another question, Councillor Christensen.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to check my understanding, if I may, that the way I'm reading these accounts is that it's a really continuation of the past few years, where we are eroding our reserves in order to fund our revenue budget effectively. And it all comes down to the fact that we're still hamstrung by our low tax rate that we seem unable to, significantly change. Is my understanding correct? My first part of my question. The second is, are we any closer to having a plan or a solution to this issue than the one we have been working on, which is essentially hoping for some form of political intervention via lobbying from government to try and get a one-off resolution?
I think Asif is going to answer this one.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of your first question, yes, in terms of reserves, just to let you know, as part of our MTFP process, we no longer get any capital grants. So usually we used to get specific capital grants that we used to ring fence for capital projects. Since sort of 2013-14, those grants have now stopped. So it means that actually we're not getting any sort of capital grants that we could top up our capital reserves with. So the impact of that then is that we're having to use our revenue funds to fund our capital purchases. So yes, in the long term, we don't tend to have many underspends year on year, and the only way our reserves will ever increase is if we have year-on underspends. The likelihood is in the coming future that's unlikely, subject to obviously funding reductions, the economic outlook, and so forth. So yes, you are correct in highlighting that yes, we are seeing a drop in funding, and which is inevitably having an impact on our reserves as well. Going forward, it's a bit of an unknown. You may be aware recently we've just had a corporate spending review announced. We were provisionally expecting it to be a 1 year only, where we assume that they may just increase our sort of government grants in line with inflation. In reality now it's come back as a 3-year spending review. So we don't know the impact of that yet. Everyone is kind of putting in bids for additional funding for next year. So we're part of a fire finance network where there's a number of fire services who are jointly doing a bid to request additional funding. On top of that, there's an uncertainty around what COVID has brought about in terms of council tax collection fund. So in terms of potential deficits next year as well. So yes, potentially it then has an impact on the level of reserves as well. So there is a bit of uncertainty going into the next financial year. But to kind of counter some of that, part of our revenue report last week, we presented to the exec committee as part of our underspend, we allocated approximately 350k into a COVID specific reserve to counter some of those unknowns that may come about next financial year.
I have asked the Section 151 officer at Buckinghamshire Council. He's doing some modelling in terms of potential impacts on revenue at different unemployment levels. And I've asked them to share that with other precept setting authorities. So hopefully you will be included in that. So we'll get some sort of idea of, what the potential impact of the economy might have on us.
That'd be beneficial. Well, thanks for that. Okay, 2 other people now. It's Councillor Stutsby, then Councillor Mallon.
Just listening to Councillor Christensen, and I asked a question earlier when the first meeting in relation to this precept deficit. It's easy to say you've got a deficit. What I can't see is the timeline of the councillors on this, because it wasn't the authority, it was the councillors who took the decision at what level they'd set the precept. The fire officers didn't take that decision. I would like to see the back for about 5 or 10 years on what level we were doing, so we can peg to see what was going on, because if you're going to make a case for an increase in the future, you've got to have the evidence of what you did in the past, and it's not there. So at some point, it looks to me like we either didn't put a council tax increase, we decreased the council tax, and then we had never put an increase in, which I believe from the officer's report was we were probably about £16 different to other similar fire authorities in council tax, which has left us where we are today. So I think we need to see that information because it's crucial to where we got to. It isn't in the report, and it was a political decision, not a fire officer's decision to do that, clearly. So I need to see that because I need to understand why. There may be really good reasons for it.
On this phone. Okay, Councillor Mallon. Councillor Mallon?
Sorry, in your verbal report, you kept on an answer to Robin's question. You kept on saying you hope you're going to get more funding. What happens if you don't? And do you think you will be able to put more money on the council tax? Because the government is pouring money out. They will be putting us all in huge debts, and so taxes will go up, and people will not be very happy to have higher council tax as well. So I'm just wondering how viable your hopes are.
Okay, is Arif or Marcus? Mark could come into this, but I'll conclude this.
Yeah, I can pick this one up, Chairman. Thank you. So as part of the medium-term financial plan, we are looking at a range of possibilities to meet this challenge. It's not come as a surprise to us that obviously council tax collection is going to be falling as kind of people lose jobs, business rates is going to be falling as kind of businesses are closing. So we're well aware of the economic challenges. So as part of the MTFP process, one of the things we're clearly focusing on is potential savings, with a focus to protect the front line as far as possible. COVID has caused a lot of issues, but it's also given us opportunities and new ways of working, better use of technology, potentially being able to reduce our kind of office footprint. So potentially looking at things like Unit 7, being able to release the lease on that to free up some savings, and just looking at the most efficient ways of delivering our back office services as well. And some of that will be collaborating with other partners as well, because COVID has shown the benefits of collaboration even more acutely than before. And we've also made available some reserves to do like an internal transformation fund. So if some funding is needed in order to release future savings, we're making that available for officers to do so. So looking at a number of things, and we will kind of keep the committee updated of progress on that as well.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Mallon, you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chairman. Is there any other plans to go into a larger group of bases like you have in Milton Keynes with the collaboration of the police, fire and ambulances? It seems to be the way forward to save money, but I wonder if you're doing that anywhere else because land is not being made anymore.
Well, I'll answer that one quickly, Mark, is that you've already said there's plenty of work going on behind the scenes in this organisation, and whatever's going on in this organisation will come back to this committee on a regular basis. So thanks for that. And Wendy, I do understand your concerns, but there is certainly a lot of work going on behind the scenes. Thank you for that. Can I put the recommendation that the unaudited statement of accounts for the financial year ending the 31st March 2020 be noted?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Graham. Right, moving on. I hope you're all getting okay on with this. Lots of information here going from page to page. So the next one is item 13. Everybody on that one? Everybody got the papers? Robin, you okay with that? Okay. Treasury management performance, Marcus.
Thank you, Chairman. For financial year 1920, the accrued interest earned was 195k, which is 45k higher than the budget set for the year of 150k. In Appendix A, page 203 of your packs, in the background section, I just want to highlight that since the treasury management function has been managed in-house, the authority has achieved investment returns of 1.156 million between financial year 13-14 and 19-20. This is in comparison to an average return the authority would have earned using a BCC and SLA agreement of 0.55 million for the same period. Next, I would like to highlight the impact of COVID-19 and what this has meant in terms of our potential return on investment. As mentioned at the O&A committee meeting in March, the Bank of England made 2 emergency cuts to the base rate, which has resulted in the authority being unable to achieve similar returns on investments during 2020-21 compared to 19-20. Therefore, this means that the interest receivable budget set for 2021 at a fire authority meeting in February prior to COVID-19 of 150k is unlikely to be achieved. For example, an investment made in July 19 for 1 million for 9 months provided a return of 1.03%, compared to if we were to make the same investment in July 2020, the potential returns would be circa 0.31%, resulting in a decrease of approximately 70%. We are ensuring that the cash flow is a priority before considering investments. The reason for being able to do this is to have access to cash immediately, to be able to pay employees, supplier invoices, and also if there were any potential delays in receiving funding from precepting authorities. As and when we do invest our funds, we will continue to work hard to obtain the best return on investments in line with our Treasury strategy and to ensure we are able to meet our short-term cash flow requirements. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Oh, okay, so recommendation of the Treasury Management for Performance 2019-20 report be noted. Is that okay with members?
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Right, we're on page 207. So everybody okay with that? There's lots of paperwork. Item 14. Business Systems Integration Project Evaluation. So it's Anne-Marie Carter.
Chairman, good morning, everybody.
Thank you.
So this paper is for noting. We're starting on page 207, just to check I'm in the right place as well. In 2014, a feasibility study was completed reviewing a number of systems and processes across the service. The output of the study was the Business and Systems Integration Business Case that was presented to the Executive Committee in 2015. The business case provides objectives and recommendations as shown in the exec summary. It also detailed the systems in scope, which covered HR, learning and development, payroll, finance, resource management, premises risk, and asset management. A project close down report was presented to the last Overview and Audit Committee in March, providing the final highlight report and the status by system. The paper being presented today is an evaluation of how the project has met the objectives and recommendations and will be the final report brought to O&A. The BASI project has delivered new modern systems and processes across the service. They give us the flexibility to develop them ongoing, supporting the requirement for continuous improvement. We were not able to find one ERP system that fitted our wide range of needs across the service, and this led to the timescales being extended as we procured and developed different systems. The good news was that the project was delivered in budget despite the extension in timescales. The appendices, which is our project evaluation document, provides more detail on how we delivered the recommendations and how we met the objectives by area. The recommendation for this report that it is noted, and I'm happy to take any questions.
We've got a question from Councillor Stupsbury. Question.
First, it's more of an observation question. I think many of what this report says recognises the questions that Councillor Wendy Manham raised about you looking at systems and do whatever. Am I understanding that correctly? If I'm not, I need to understand it better. Thank you.
Is that a comment or is this an observation? I think there was an offer.
Is that about recognising the changes, Chairman, and also the observation about examining things? This report sort of addresses that. Am I reading that correct? If I'm not, I'd like to be told I'm not, so I understand it better, Chairman.
Okay. You did. I think there was an offer actually earlier in the meeting about understanding these papers. I think outside the meeting, I think it'd be a positive. You can meet with one of our officers to go through all these sort of papers and procedures. Is that okay, Robin?
If they've got the patience, yeah.
I'm very happy to arrange for that to happen.
Robin, I think it's been noted. Okay, any other observations on that? This paper is only for noting. Is that agreed? Okay, everybody?
Yeah. Agreed.
Motion carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, item 15. Find your papers. Corporate risk management. And this is Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're at page 229 in our packs. As we've got some new members on the committee, we thought that it might be helpful if I preface this paper by briefly outlining our approach to corporate risk management before reporting on the current status of the risks themselves. Firstly, this is a report that comes to every meeting. So you'll get an update in November and obviously from there on. So it's a standing item on the agenda. The methodology that we use is based on good practice guidance from ALARM, which was founded as the Association of Local Authority Risk Managers, but that guidance is now used widely across the public sector, including central as well as local government, housing, education, and blue light services. So you might already have seen similar approaches in use from your work in your constituent authorities or elsewhere. As you'll have seen from the appendices to this report, we use a standard 5x5 scoring matrix to assess the probability and impact of a risk crystallizing. The risk assessments are detailed in the Corporate Risk Register at Appendix 3, which is at page 237 in your pack. An overview of these and a summary of recent changes to the risk scores are shown at Appendices 1 and 2 respectively, which are on pages 233 and 235 of your packs. As mentioned in the executive summary in the cover paper, the risks presented to you today are those that have been escalated from other registers held at directorate and departmental levels, where most of our risks are recorded and assessed. Typically, they are escalated because they have strategic implications. Departments and directorates regularly review their own risk registers, and they're also scrutinised on a quarterly basis by our internal performance management board. And at that, if there's anything that we feel requires potential escalation to the corporate risk register, it gets referred on to the strategic management board, who also review the current set of corporate risks at their monthly meetings. So there's an awful lot of internal scrutiny of these, in addition, obviously, to yourselves having a sight of the risks. If you would like any more detail on our approach to this area, a copy of our corporate risk management policy is available from Katie. It's quite a concise document, so not a long or difficult read. So that's available if you would like to see it. Turning to the risks themselves, I am conscious of the fact, obviously, we've already begun to touch on some of these already around the finance side and also information security. So if I perhaps just refer you to the risk map at Appendix 1, page 233 of your packs, which just gives you a bird's eye view of everything. I will give you a brief update on each of the risks before taking any questions that you might have. As you can see, we've got 2 risks displaying a red RAG status and 3 at amber. So turning first to the staff availability risk, you will have seen from the evaluation and commentary in the risk register at page 238 that at a tactical level, staff availability has remained high throughout the period since the COVID-19 pandemic began here in the UK. This may be because of the enhanced cleaning and social distancing regimes that have been adopted, and these have perhaps helped us to keep other seasonal infections at bay as well as COVID itself. However, the risk status remains at red because of the potential impact of recent rulings relating to the firefighters' pension scheme, which means that we are likely to face a steeper staff retirement profile than would have otherwise been the case. Obviously, those affected include many of our more experienced and senior staff who will not be easy to replace on a like-for-like basis, especially as this is a national issue with all services exposed to this risk to a greater or lesser extent depending on their workforce profile. So despite our ongoing efforts to mitigate this risk by recruiting new staff and accelerating the development of officers throughout the command structure, it will be challenging to fully offset the loss of valuable skills and knowledge that comes with long experience. So that's the rationale behind it remaining at that red rag status. Funding and savings, again, as I said, we've already started to touch on those. As you're aware, most of our funding is derived from council tax receipts and an allocation from business rates. Historically, these have been fairly predictable from year to year, with any uncertainties generally confined to areas where we've received specific government grants for things like our urban search and rescue team. However, the impact of COVID-19 means that there is now significant risk across our entire funding base over the medium term. The extent of this is not yet clear, but obviously there is potential for both council tax and business rates receipts to fall as many sectors of the economy contract, with associated business failures and rising unemployment. Also, yesterday, and Asif touched on this earlier, the Chancellor launched the Comprehensive Spending Review, which will deliver an interim net zero review in the autumn, followed by a final report in the spring. And again, we're of a view that probably we're looking at a one-year settlement here, so it won't give us any certainty over the medium term. Although the Chancellor did not fix a set spending envelope and confirmed that departmental spending, both capital and resource, will grow in real terms across the CSR period, he also indicated that there will need to be tough choices, and that's the wording in the government announcement, in other areas of spending beyond those linked to the 6 priority areas identified in the announcement. And they're broadly associated with COVID-19 economic recovery, the government's national levelling up agenda, national security, and so on and so forth. Again, that risk therefore remains at a RAG status, given all of that uncertainty. Obviously, it's been very closely monitored by our finance team. Just regarding the information security risk, Jerry Barry touched on that a little earlier. In many ways, it is kind of business as usual for us with this. COVID-19 obviously has provided new subject material for those seeking to illegally access and disrupt systems, extract ransom payments, or protected information, rather than giving them a new modus operandi. Although there is some potential for some of the new virtual meeting technologies, such as we're using today, to be accessed and exploited, as we've seen with some councils during the early stages of adopting these technologies, where they kind of had a very much an open platform. Therefore, we've left that risk at an amber rag status for now. You'll also see we've got a risk there around the UK-EU trade deal, and this is more specifically around the risk of there being physical disruption to our operations due to there being no, or perhaps an insufficiently comprehensive agreement governing future UK relations, including trade with the EU. You will see that we have elevated this risk to amber by increasing the probability score, given that the UK has made it clear that it will not extend the negotiations beyond the existing transitional period, which ends on the 31st of December. Alongside this are the ongoing free trade negotiations with third countries, which could also have implications for UK-EU focused supply chains. The CFO, our Chief Fire Officer, is monitoring these via the National Fire Chiefs Council. They have a working group on that. Hopefully the position will be clearer by the time this committee meets next in November, as it's indicated that October is the latest point at which a deal could be done, with sufficient time left for the EU to ratify it before the end of December. And then finally, you will see that we've also added a new risk to the register around the potential for a resurgence of COVID-19 or maybe the emergence of a pandemic influenza as we move into the autumn and winter period. In addition to the treatments listed at page 245 of your packs, as in previous years, we're offering free flu vaccinations to all our staff. Obviously, that won't reduce the risk of COVID-19 infection. However, we will continue to maintain our enhanced cleaning and social distancing regimes to reduce the risk of transmission until such time as a reliable vaccine becomes widely available, if it does, of course. So that's an overview of the risks. I'll now break for any questions, and I think we have one already. So I'll break for questions before I hand it back to the chairman for the recommendations. Thank you.
You got 2 questions. One from Councillor Mallon.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I was pleased to see that there were no higher levels of sickness due to COVID, That was always a worry. And that's a lot of stress to keep on cleaning. So I hope their high levels of cleaning don't drop. The reduced income, how are you going to get over the retirement problem with the experienced people? Are you going to have an increase in apprenticeships? Are you trying to recruit trained fire officers back into the force? How are you going to meet that reduced staff level, possibly?
Yeah. I'll touch on this, and one or two of my colleagues might want to jump in on it as well. We have an ongoing process of recruiting new firefighters via our apprentice scheme. As you've seen from the report, we recruited 20 back in the spring, and we're looking at potentially a further recruitment in the autumn. Obviously, that's good, but of course, obviously, bringing in people who are new and obviously inexperienced and need to be trained up. And obviously, that does place pressure on the remaining experienced staff that we have. We are doing a lot of work also, obviously, to accelerate the development of people from our kind of junior officer layers. We have a thing called the Supportive Leadership Program, in which I participate as well, to try and bring people up. But yeah, it obviously is a difficulty, and of course, there's lots of kind of what you might things that sit in the domain of tacit knowledge, where actually it's very hard to get a handle on what you've lost in a proactive way. Though obviously we do make every effort to try and make sure that we are backfilling where we can. On the funding side, I think perhaps I might ask if Mark or Asif want to make a comment about that.
Yeah, Mark, because Mick wants to come in about apprenticeships, I believe, don't you?
Yeah, just on the point that Stuart's made there as well. Thank you, Chairman. Just to give some reassurance, it's a kind of a blended approach that we're looking at around, how we begin to recruit people at all different levels within the organisation, from sort of the very senior to obviously our apprenticeship scheme that we're using at the moment, and then how we develop and potentially fast track people through. And we've recently developed a sort of senior officer development sort of process, working with Adrian Thomas, who wrote the Thomas Review on the Fire and Rescue Service, who's owns his own recruitment consultancy as well, and he's developed some bespoke packages around how we develop the more senior officers. But we do have other options available to us with bringing people in at different levels, and also re-engaging some officers if required on short-term contracts to cover that gap. So we're very alive to it. Our workforce planning is as accurate as it can be, bearing in mind the difficulties that we've had with different court cases around the pensions schemes. But we are alive to the fact, and our workforce plan is updated on a very regular basis so that we know where our gaps are going to be, and then we look at how we are going to fill those gaps in the future.
Yeah, so there was an invitation for Mark or Asif to come in, but do you want to come in for a quick comment?
Yeah, I'll come in on that one, Chairman, just briefly. So in terms of funding, we have a fund establishment. That's what we base our workforce plan on that Mick's referring to. So sometimes we'll be slightly under-established, and the challenge there is to recruit them. So because they're funded posts, the funding's there. Sometimes we'll have to go slightly over, anticipating people will leave, and that's where we use our reserve to smooth some of that impact. So when we're kind of over-established, we'll draw on reserves. If we're slightly under-established, we'll put money into reserves for future to try and keep as close to the predicted retirement profile as possible.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Christensen, please, and then Councillor Stubbsbury afterwards, and then we.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a question around some of the scoring of the key risks. That on pandemic resurgence, scoring likelihood of 4 seems reasonable. Impact level 3. You noted correctly that we've coped really well throughout the first phase of the outbreak, particularly in relation to staff availability. But I think we also have to recognise that Buckinghamshire escaped the first wave relatively lightly. Our infection rates have certainly been considerably less than other parts of the country. So is the severity rating of 3 based on how we experienced the last few months, rather than what we think the next few months might be like in a second wave? Have we compared impact with other fire authorities in more highly affected areas from the first phase? And thirdly, I guess, is do we need to review that severity rating on the basis that historically the second wave of pandemics can be between 3 and 5 times worse than the first wave? So just kind of a long way of asking is, do you think we should be reviewing that?
Well, I think the answer to that is obviously we need to keep it under constant review in light of the intelligence that we receive in relation to this. In relation to the impact score itself, it's kind of a bit of a blend. You're absolutely right. So far, obviously, it's had a relatively negligible impact on our own availability. But of course, we have had to scale back quite a lot of work that we do proactively in the community with our prevention work, sort of obviously domestic home safety, engagement with the business community, and so forth. So that sort of impact of 3 is it's at this stage. I'll be honest, it is something of a guesstimate. In terms of what other authorities are doing, obviously we we're very well plugged into the local resilience forum here in the Thames Valley and are aware of what's going on elsewhere as well. So obviously when we make these judgments, we have regard to the bigger picture across the Thames Valley and nationally. And I think it's in some respects, I mean, obviously the impact of a second wave will very much depend on the control measures that need to be adopted, and whether, for example, a kind of, the government's current strategy of sort of localized lockdowns coupled with track and trace and so forth are effective, or whether, if it was of the sort of severity that you've indicated, perhaps based on precedents, that it might need to be a wider, almost back to national lockdown situation. But of course, at this stage, we don't really have sight of what that will look like, and obviously we don't know whether a coronavirus of this type, I mean, obviously I'm not a scientist, will behave in the same way that, for example, pandemic flus have in the past, where we've sort of you're absolutely right. I think we saw that with the Spanish flu back in the First World War. Yeah, but it's absolutely a watching brief.
Nick.
So may I just come back on that?
Oh, yes, quickly.
Yes, what would we do differently if we did rate the severity score as 4 and then moved it into a red risk? What actions would we do differently compared to where we are as an amber risk now?
Do you want me to? I can come in on that, Councillor. Just to cover one of the other points as well that you raised around how we compared to areas that had higher infection rates. Because every day we have to do returns to the Home Office around how it's impacted upon us, and then we get a kind of state of the nation reports across all fire and rescue services in the United Kingdom. And the sort of the true picture of that was there were 1 or 2 authorities that may have had an amber rating, but generally most fire and rescue services were green throughout because of actually we're quite disciplined in the way that we wear PPE, the way that we have put our cleaning routines in place, etc., which I think has helped throughout. So compared to other areas that have had a high infection rate, that they haven't suffered sort of proportionately more than we have. And just compare, if you look at the Leicestershire, for example, they've been green throughout when you look at the Home Office returns as well. So we're not sort of overly concerned with regard to comparing ourselves with other authority areas where they may have had higher infection rates, because not all firefighters work in the areas where they work, live or work, sort of where they work, etc. So on that respect, but if we were to rate the risk higher, I think what would we do differently? That's a really good question, and we've been looking at all of our lessons learned and working through this with the local resilience forum as well, as to how we would put measures in differently if we do get a second wave. And the honesty is that because of the successes that we've seen, we would continue with more of the same, but we'd just probably be able to react a little bit quicker and a little bit smarter and update our guidance to staff quicker as and when guidance arrives from government as well, because our systems are a lot slicker now and we've learned a lot as we've gone through. I hope that gives you some assurance, but from a technical perspective, it'd be really difficult to nail down exactly the measures that we would do differently. We'd have to adapt as we went along.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's a really good response. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Stutesbury. Robin?
Thank you, Chair. The first part of my question has been answered, so that's good in Councillor Christian's question. The other part of my question is you refer to the October and leaving the EU and not knowing what the costs and benefits that might be. Decisions taken, we're leaving the EU, that's not what I'm talking about, but we do have to record whether there's been a benefit financially to the authority through it, or whether there's been a cost to the authority for it, because these things are important. We can't brush over them. If suddenly it creates a huge amount more money in the coffers against our precept, we must record that positive action. And if it incurs a cost on the precept, which means it's a negative drain on the resources of the authority, that has to be recorded, and there has to be a baseline before that so that we can record it accurately, and it isn't carried either way in political opinion, because there will either be benefits or there will be negatives. I'm not a statistician, I don't know, but I'm hoping that we record that properly, because our ratepayers will want to know why we can't do something, and if it's a burden, why we can't do it, or why we can do something extra because there's been a saving. We should be open about that, and we shouldn't try to be worried about not being and I'm hoping that's what's going to happen in that report, which will come back post October. I wouldn't be very happy if it comes back saying, well, we've left, this is what it is, this is what it ends. I want to know why and what. It's not, the other part of it I thought was really adequately answered on the COVID.
Very much. I think I'll answer that question to say that your comments have been noted, and that will be noted in the minutes today, won't it, Graham?
Indeed, Chairman.
Thank you, Stuart. So can I just put the recommendation, please? The stated report on identified the corporate risk at Annex C be reviewed and approved. Yes?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Number 2, comment be provided to officers for consideration and attention in the future updates and reports. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
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 Sorry, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, item 16, 2019-20 compliments, concerns and complaints, and that's Jerry.
Thank you. As you can see from the paper, the number of concerns, complaints, compliments is still relatively low, and we still rely very heavily on using the satisfaction survey. The problem we're having now is the feedback from the satisfaction survey is also reducing. So this is a very small sample. I suppose on the plus side that the range of compliments, concerns and complaints have become more diverse, which means that it's always a learning environment for us. We've had no reportable complaints. This is obviously a key thing to look at. So nothing has gone to the Information Commissioner. Nothing has gone to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. And we haven't had anything reportable in terms of information breaches. There's not a great deal more to add to that than that which is in front of you. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, anybody? None?
None.
Okay, this report is noted. Thank you very much.
That's carried, Chairman.
Right, swiftly on. Something very close to my heart is apprenticeships, and where are we now?
Dave Whitelock.
Dave Whitelock, of course it is. Right.
Oh, hello. Can everyone see me or?
I think you've just turned your camera around, Dave. We can see you now.
There we go. Can you all hear me?
David. Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much for coming. Let's listen to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. This report sets out the Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes Fire Authority annual statutory report against the public sector apprenticeship targets for the year ending 31st of March 2020. Although the figures for the new apprenticeship starts for this reporting year appears low, the statutory reporting is taken as an average over the course of 4 reporting years ending in March 2021. The target figure would require, on average, approximately 10 new starts per year, Since April 2017, the authority has had in excess of 70 new apprenticeship starts, which would by far exceed the required figures for the Department for Education. We've been working hard to transform our firefighter apprentices proposition. As an organisation, we have moved away from our previous apprenticeship training agency model and have now employed directly and appointed a separate training provider. This has enabled us, the organisation, to utilise its levy and all new starters to benefit from local terms and conditions and national pay rates, which will hopefully enable us to employ the right candidates from a larger range of applicants as we offer a more attractive package. In addition to this, the authority has demonstrated its commitment to apprenticeships by investing in and appointing a dedicated apprenticeship development officer to provide the necessary learning support to all of its apprentices. The authority has continued to have representation at the NFCC Apprenticeship Forum and the Operational Firefighter Apprenticeship Standard Review, both of which will allow the organisation to be better equipped for the future. With the current and previous apprentices now embedded across the support, staff and operational roles, the authority should be proud of its track record in employing new apprentices and also upskilling those existing employees to develop further future leaders. As a look to the future, we will be exploring the help of Colchester Institute, the possibility of signing up to the Register of Apprentice Training Providers to become a supporting provider, which will enable us to deliver training to our own staff. Are there any questions?
Any questions? In the meantime, Mick, could you come in?
Just for the benefit of some of the newer members of ONA and on the authority, just a bit of background information. We were the first fire and rescue service in the country to introduce an apprenticeship scheme for firefighters some years ago, and we led on the development of the Trailblazer Firefighter Standard for firefighters. So we're really proud of the work that the team have done around apprenticeships, and as Dave's mentioned, we've almost doubled our target and we draw down more than our levy every single year. So it's a really good news story, and so we continue to be at the forefront of the development of the apprenticeship programme as we move forward, and also not just with firefighters but extended out across all of the workforce with some professional apprenticeships as well at different levels throughout the organisation. So it really is a good news story. Despite the low numbers, and that's just purely a matter of timing around one apprenticeship cohort starting before the end of March last year and one just after April this year. So some great work done by the team there, and thanks, Dave.
Any questions from any members?
None indicated.
I think somebody's indicated. It's Mabu, is it?
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just saying that it's very good to see the apprenticeship. I just wonder if it's make any difference to the due to COVID-19 people coming forward in that way.
Dave,
I can take this.
Yes, please, Dave. Yeah.
We struggled a little bit with what we was going to do with the apprenticeship course for this year, but it was decided through the organisation that we would move forward with it. There was a lot of work done with the Fire Service College in planning and preparation beforehand, a lot of work done obviously with the service in and around COVID and how we socially distance with the apprentices whilst they was on their course. And I firmly believe it actually worked quite well. There was a lot of work, like I say, done certainly with the Health and Safety Department, and everyone got through the process as easy as it could have been, I suppose, with COVID-related issues around us.
And just to support Dave on that, there was some kind of national talk around training recruits, apprentices during the COVID period, and the risk assessment was that the benefit of having firefighters available to provide a service to the public outweighed the risk. So, and as Dave said, it's proved successful, and we've now got a number of new apprentices riding fire engines that started with us in April. So the risk assessment appeared to be suitable and sufficient in that arena.
Yeah, thank you.
So just to add on to that, I think us as a service, we should be quite proud of what we achieved in relation to COVID, because the Fire Service College had closed leading up to the start of the apprentices, and we managed to run the first part of the course in service, and then once the college had opened, we then transferred the apprentices down to the college to complete their course as well. So we should be certainly praising our operational training department for the work that they undertook in that area as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor, thanks for that question. Councillor Exon, please.
Yes, the apprenticeship scheme is a very good news story, and we have led right from the very beginning. Can you advise how many of the other fire authorities now have apprenticeship schemes? Are they as comprehensive as ours? And do we know if they do things differently to us? And can we benchmark ourselves against them?
Certainly from my point of view, I haven't got facts and figures in front of me, but some of the local services to us, they weren't initially doing apprenticeships, but they are moving forward in that way as well. As Mick quite rightly said, we was the forefront leaders of apprenticeships within the fire and rescue services as well, and quite a lot of people have looked at the model that we have actually undertaken and started to follow that at the same time as well. But I will be looking at certain other services, certainly Oxfordshire, Royal Berkshire, to see if they are going to be moving down the apprenticeship model, to see if we can align ourselves with those as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stutsbury, please.
Thank you. I follow on from the comments that this is a really positive scheme. I was an apprentice when the Thatcher government abolished apprenticeships. So I remember what a good thing apprenticeships were and how they were funded. Now, I praise you for the work you've done to do. Life goes in the figure of 8, doesn't it? What was popular once comes back again. But one thing I think we should try to capitalise on this. The one thing I do know through talking to young people, the fire service is still seen as what I call a good example of community leadership. Fire officers and firemen are seen in the community as pillars of the community, in the sense that they are well respected members of the community. And this apprenticeship scheme is an opportunity to signal good leadership, to signal good community work, and to encourage young people to have someone to flag their future life choices against. Because in so many families, there isn't an ideal person who they can flag their life choices against. And if you talk to young people, they all love firemen, you know, and they don't even become resentful when they become teenagers against firemen, not in the same way as they do other uniforms. So I think we've got an opportunity here to use an appropriate way our young people as they go through the scheme, to demonstrate to other young people there's the careers out there that you can do, and if only in that way, because we do need to show the positive work. You know, I think it absolutely should be applauded.
Yes, Mick, I think he's going to applaud this, and he's smiling because he's
just
very proud of this.
You mentioned about equal pay earlier, Councillor, and I just would say that we've been firefighters since about 1980, as opposed to firemen and women, just a bit of terminology there. But no, you're absolutely right. We do engage with our local communities through a number of ways to try and encourage youngsters to join our apprenticeship scheme. And, you know, we're looking at different cadet type schemes, etc. And I'm sure Dave will have a bit more information on that. But we do use, you know, different pathways and avenues into the organisation to try and encourage local young people to join the fire and rescue service and have a career with us. And the apprenticeship program has been really successful in that, and you can see from the figures themselves, they speak for themselves. In that, you know, we've given a lot of local young people a real opportunity of a long and rewarding career over the coming years. So another point's really well made, and thank you for that.
Dave, do you want to conclude this?
Yes, please. Thank you for your comments, Councillor. I really appreciate those as well. I'd just like to add that and echo Mick's compliments or thoughts. We do a lot of work in the surrounding area. We have our fire crews go out and champion apprenticeships within the service, and it's not only operational staff that we have apprenticeships for, it's also support staff as well. And also, just the last thing as well, we have many age ranges of apprenticeship firefighters, ranging from 18 all the way up to 41. So whereas I suppose lots of years ago, certainly myself, I joined as an engineer, as an apprentice, as an 18-year-old. Nowadays, apprenticeships are looked at not just for the youngsters, but also for people moving through the years, as it would be. And lots of people are doing a lot of work to encourage other people to train at a, let's say, mid-year, as it would be, not as in just coming out of school leavers. So that's something that we should be looking at as well.
Thank you for that.
The last comment, and I do think the importance that the fire officers do in communities, if they are, and you are a role model, and when I say that, people don't react well to uniforms, but you're a uniform that still is respected and isn't challenged in challenging communities, and you can get places where other people can't because you're respected, and that's a really point well made, I think.
I think we all know where you're coming from there. Good points, actually. Okay, I'd like to put a recommendation to this. It is recommended that the authority annual return attached as Appendix B be endorsed for the submission to the Department of Education for the publication on the authority's website. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
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 Carried, Chairman.
Right, moving on to item 18, and everybody's on that page, I hope. There's lots of documentation here. Okay. Right, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, Fire and Rescue Services, Buckinghamshire Fire Rescue Services Improvement Plan Update, David Morris. Norris, even. Hello, David.
Hello, Chairman. Thanks very much, and good morning, councillors. For reference, we are now on page 283 of your packs, and this is a paper for noting. To give some background to new members of the committee, our inspection concluded in the summer of 2019 and was the culmination of a range of inspection activity, including a self-assessment, which was completed across the whole organisation, a strategic briefing to the HMI for our service, which is Matt Parr, and his inspection team, which was delivered by the senior team, and did involve the chairman of the authority at that point. What's called Discovery Week, where a team of inspectors come into service and spend time with a range of staff across the organisation to understand their role, what they do, and how effective and efficient they are in their work. Engagement activity, which is where the dedicated service liaison lead for this service spends time again working with a range of colleagues, including the senior team, to understand more the strategic context within which we're working and how we bring some of those pressures back into service and resolve them to continue to provide an effective service to the public. And the culmination really from our point of view, and certainly from our staff's point of view, is field work. And that's the more visible part of the inspection, where the inspection team come in and conduct a series of interviews over a week, and then they consider the findings over the next period of months, and they produce our report. And our report was released in December 2019. So the inspection is formed of consideration against 3 pillars, and the pillars are effectiveness, efficiency, and people. And depending on the matters found, and certainly considering the whole range of evidence that the inspection team find, they give a judgment against each of those pillars. So 3 judgments for the organisation, which are not aggregated up to 1 judgment, because it was felt that the divergence between those pillars was too great to aggregate them together. And so we achieved a judgment of requiring improvement for both effectiveness and efficiency, and a good for people. So depending on the matters found, the HMIC report may suggest either and in combination areas for improvement, a cause for concern, and recommendations. And just for members' awareness, if a cause for concern is identified, it will always be accompanied by identified recommendations. So in our report, the HMIC FRS colleagues pointed out 11 identified areas for improvement. Notwithstanding those identified areas for improvement, there was commentary within the report against which we would choose to take some action, and I'll cover that shortly. So there were 11 areas for improvement, 1 cause for concern, which was accompanied by 2 recommendations, and I'll cover some of those when we come to the improvement plan, which is at Annex A. So looking forward, our service liaison lead, our dedicated service liaison lead, was returned to service, as were many of the others, with the outbreak of COVID-19. And we received a letter, again, as did all police forces and fire and rescue services, in mid-March, where Sir Tom Windsor, who is the Chief Inspector for Fire and Rescue Services, wrote out confirming that all inspection work would be suspended and that arrangements for secondees would be refreshed. And we currently have one officer, one of our group commanders, who has been seconded to HMIC FRS, and he will be covering areas in the south of the country when inspections recommence towards the latter part of this year and the earlier part of next year. So some further context. Our Chief Fire Officer, Chief Officer Thelwell, is a member of HMIC FRS's external reference group, and that is a board which is formed by invitation of the HMI for Fire, Zoe Billingham, and has representatives from Home Office, from the National Fire Chiefs Council, the Local Government Association, Police, Fire and Crime Commissioners, and other advisors, and includes our Chief Officer as a representative of Chief Fire Officers. So not representing an organisation per se, but trying to give a view of how inspection affects fire and rescue services from a Chief Fire Officer's perspective. And is able to, and therefore the Chief is able to bring back a range of information and considerations which HMIC FRS are thinking about in order to assist them in improving the effectiveness of their inspection regime, and also being able to represent to them the impacts across fire and rescue services more broadly. So at the last external reference group meeting on the 12th of May, which was conducted virtually, HMIC FRS discussed the possibility of a COVID-19 related inspection for fire and rescue services, and that's being echoed in the other side of the inspectorate in policing. And some early discussions took place around what shape that inspection may take. And you'll see at Appendix B, subsequent to that meeting, a letter was released by Zoe Billingham to all Chief Fire Officers and fire authorities and colleagues, just outlining what that approach would be. And essentially, we are expecting that HMIC FRS will conduct an inspection into fire and rescue services response to COVID-19 later in the year, and we wait to see the format that will take. But we do understand that it would not include a judgment. It's more a narrative as to how well services respond and work in partnership across local authority areas, across local resilience forum, and a range of other mechanisms to ensure that the service is provided to the public as well as ongoing support. So we wait to see what shape that will take. We believe that we are well engaged with HMIC FRS development and therefore can be well placed to ensure we are as prepared as possible. Moving back to the substantive inspection process, our report concluded round 1, where all 45 fire and rescue services were visited. Round 2 commenced in its data collection stage in the early part of this year, and that was also the activity which was suspended during the outbreak. We understand now that that will recommence towards the latter part of this year, so that's the data collection for the first phase of round 2, and therefore inspection activity will increase, leading to tranche 1 inspections taking place towards the early part of next year. Our inspections were timetabled for June and July 2021. We understand that will now be deferred, probably to late 2021, possibly early 2022, and we wait to see confirmation of HMIC FRS's timetable to understand how that may impact. Going back to the areas for improvement and the recommendations and also the cause for concern, we understand that HMIC FRS are keen to continue engagement with those FRSs who were awarded, if that's the right terminology, a cause for concern in their report. And we are expecting colleagues in the inspectorate to contact us later on this year to assess our progress against the cause for concern. And if I can bring your attention now to the appendix, Annex A, which is our improvement plan, page 290 of your packs, you can see where we detail the recommendations. There are 2 recommendations, and you can see how we have responded to those. And I'm pleased to be able to confirm that during the production of the report and certainly subsequent to that, we have maintained positive engagement with the team in HMIC FRS so that they are briefed on our progress and they can take a view as to how well we are dealing with the recommendations. So thinking about Annex A, what we've done as an organisation is take a look through the whole report, and in addition to the areas for improvement, we are considering the commentary within the report and where there are areas where we would choose to place some emphasis. And as you would expect, our approach has been not to slavishly follow everything that's in the inspection report, because quite clearly the next range of inspections might be considering different matters, and we don't want to be in a position where we're just playing catch up against inspection reports. We've tested that approach with our service liaison lead and colleagues in the inspectorate more widely. Their view is that's sensible and proportionate, and we of course continue that engagement as we move through the next period. So the format of the action plan that you can see in Appendix A really is a summary of the ongoing improvement work that is being carried out across the service, and that has continued through our response to COVID, because many of the points that were raised are around our response effectiveness as well as our prevention and protection activity. And as you would expect, whilst that may be scaled back in some areas, it hasn't ceased completely. So I'll pause there as I've covered a range of points within that, and I'll be very happy to take any questions.
Any questions? No questions? Do you want to conclude this?
Councillor Christensen.
Councillor Christensen.
Councillor Christensen, please.
Apologies, Chairman, I was a bit slow putting my hand up. Just a quick question, page 288 talks about the improvement plan for reducing the number of prevention visits. Just interested to hear your thoughts on whether you think we're more are we going to be looking to do more prevention visits, or are we focusing on improving the quality of the ones we're doing so the number will stay the same but they'll be more effective?
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question, and of course it's very topical in the current environment. What's been clear to us over recent months is that the levels of and type of risk in the community has now changed significantly. And if we think about, as an example, members of the public who were previously in a care setting, who were released from that care setting back into their own residential environments to make capacity for COVID-related treatments within hospitals, those members of the public are still in the community. So that presents a very dynamic and changing risk profile for us and the partners with whom we work. So what we're now doing is working with Buckinghamshire Council from their point of introducing new community boards and refresh structures within Milton Keynes to understand how we work better in partnership to deliver our existing programme of foreign wellness checks, and how we may need to refresh those over the next 12 to 18 months to represent better some of the risks that we will see in communities. What we're also doing is working closely with colleagues in health to understand how the data collection, which they've put in place to assess COVID risk, can be brought into our risk mapping so that we understand more clearly where some of those concentrations of risk now are and how we might respond to them. And the approach we're taking is that we will continue to deliver our core activity, we'll continue to keep that under review, but the package of measures which we deliver the public will include a more integrated approach between our prevention, response and protection activity, and overlaid against that, and part of our developing work through the Local Resilience Forum, is how we can assist communities to help themselves, how we can assist communities to be more resilient, not only to COVID-19 outbreaks, but also to some of the other risks and other measures that we see developing over the recent period. So that's the approach that we're currently testing with partners and with colleagues in other organisations. It seems to be a measured and proportionate response. It's something that we'll keep under review, and of course that will be reported back to this committee.
Thank you. Councillor Exon, next question.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 290 and it says page 23 and is ensure that we have the capacity and capability to support our activities. Now, in the response, it makes a number of recommendations here that is going to increase the amount of operational people we have, and they're increasing the number of full-time operational people. This is obviously going to have financial implications. And at the same time, the report also said that one of their concerns was that we didn't have sufficient finance. And so the two are rid of the conflict. By adding the extra people, are we going to be taking away from somewhere else? Or are we going to be looking to generate extra income from another way?
Okay, thank you for that. So it's a good question, and I'll invite Mark to come back on some of the specific points. But in terms of the increase in our operational establishment, we already had well-developed plans in place, which we shared with inspectors. And through the growth bid process, which you heard referred to earlier on, we have secured an increase in headcount, which provides more resilience and more capacity, both to the response side of the organisation and also in our prevention and our protection teams. And you'll see in the report there's a range of other measures. Now, that addressed directly the recommendation which was in our inspection report, and further down the page on 290, which was the second recommendation around consultation, that was completed with our public consultation on the new public safety plan, which has just been released. So in terms of pressures on funding, my view would be we had taken those into account already during the growth bid process and trying to understand if there were further financial and other pressures, how we would be able to accommodate those. And we felt that they were, again, proportionate to the risks that were faced. But again, and as you would expect, that's something that we keep under regular review. To come back to your point about income streams, that is a debate that we often have. And members might be aware that a consultation has just been released from Home Office into some of the measures that might be introduced in changes in fire protection legislation. And that does include possibility for revenue streams. I think it's safe to say that from our perspective, we assume that they will be zero, because it's unlikely that there would be a reliable and sufficient and sustained income stream. And of course, in the current environment, I think it might be unwise and certainly untimely to take forward any predictions on revenue streams when, of course, there's so much uncertainty over the immediate and over the forthcoming periods. So I'm not quite sure whether Mark might want to come back on some of those specific points.
Yeah, Mark, can you come in and just add to this?
Yeah, certainly, Chairman. So just to add to what Dave says, in terms of the budget setting for this year, what we did is we took a zero-based budget approach. So rather than kind of incrementally increase or decrease previous year's budgets, we effectively started with a blank sheet of paper, and that enabled us to kind of locate savings across a number of areas, which enabled us to increase our whole time establishment, as Dave said, from 260 to 280. And that was effective from the 1st of April this year. So that is already built into the budget. You will notice on page 290, though, that it does say the potential to increase by a further 10 in the following year, subject to comprehensive spending review. So that's something we will have to keep under review as to whether we can increase by a further 10 or not. But we'll let that play out. So as we get more information, we'll keep the committee updated on that as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Minns, you want to come in?
Yeah, it's possibly not a question you can answer, but I'm thinking, given the current constraints on all, government income and the outgoings and that in terms of pro-COVID and with Brexit coming up, do you think there might be a way in which the Home Office won't have the same sort of commitment anymore to carry out inspections to the same high standard that they have been? And in a way, they were going all in the right direction. So I only came into this a year ago, and when I attended the scrutiny training at Coventry University, I was really impressed by the way this was going, because a large part, we had all the introduction. There was, I think, tranche 1 was just happening at the time. I'm just a little bit concerned about that. We're all preparing ourselves to really, raise our own standards and that. But do we have any indication that this commitment will still be there?
It's a good question. So whilst the HMIC FRS with the Fire and Rescue Service suffix has been in place since early 2018 through its inception, HMIC as an Inspectorate of Constabulary has been in place for over 150 years. So I think it's safe to say that the commitment from Home Office to inspection regimes is enduring, and we would expect that to continue. You're quite right to point out the hiatus in inspection work between round 1 and round 2. And it is interesting that HMIC FRS have taken a view. They've done so in close consultation with Home Office, who of course fund the inspectorate directly, have taken a view that this would be an appropriate time to think about an inspection into COVID. And I suspect, and certainly speaking with colleagues in HMIC FRS, I suspect that's to provide ongoing assurance to government that certainly the police and fire and rescue services are well placed and focused on carrying out their core activity at the same time as providing a flexible response to the changing needs of the public and changing needs of partners. So I would expect that the inspection regime will continue. Going back to a point I made earlier around us as an organisation not slavishly following the comments that are in the inspectorate report, HMIC FRS recognise that. And equally, they do recognise that we have a wider improvement and assurance programme, and I think you're going to hear some more on that shortly, of which this forms part. So I am comfortable that we have good mechanisms and robust mechanisms in place which help us improve across a suite of our activity, whilst taking into account some of the specific recommendations within HMIC FRS.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, thank you very much for your response. Thank you.
Okay, David, you finished now? Or, do you want
yes,
to...
thank you. So, Chairman, could I bring you back to page 284 and the recommendation that members note the current position regarding the current inspection plan and our service-specific improvement plan.
Oh, you've done it for me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Motion carried, Chairman.
Right, so item 19, Operational Assurance Improvement Plan. That was Steve Wells is coming on that one.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, this particular report is on page 297 of your packs. The purpose is to provide members with an update on the progress that continues to be made with regard to the Operational Assurance Improvement Plan. This plan is very much a dynamic document used to enhance our ability to capture, scrutinise and respond to all operational learning across a range of activities, be that internally or externally. The important thing is this learning is routinely shared with our frontline staff using different formats, and what it does, it actually encourages and emphasises of having that collective responsibility towards continuous improvement in respect to operational performance. The delivery of the improvement plan also ensures that our safe systems of work, our procedures conform to the latest safety standards and also national occupational guidance. A fundamental part of our assurance process has been the contractual relationship we have had with the company Operational Assurance Limited, which is due to end on the 31st of August this year. Their latest visit and resulting report, focusing on specifically our high-rise procedures and command support, led to them making 14 recommendations, which are detailed within the report itself. But there were 9 which they classed as being advisory, which they felt that positive management action was required, and then 5 they classed as being suggested, where they felt that management need to undertake a review of some of the identified issues. So these 14 recommendations will now be presented to the Operational Assurance Group, and those members of that group will then determine whether these recommendations are deserving for inclusion onto the Operational Assurance Improvement Plan. The arrangement we have had with Operational Assurance Limited has proven to be extremely beneficial, strengthening our existing learning culture within the service, and it has better prepared us for the last and any future inspections conducted by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. I'd like to now draw members' attention to Appendix A and the Operational Assurance Improvement Plan itself. As stated previously, this is a dynamic document and therefore will be subject to frequent change as we capture learning from our wide range of operational activity. The report is for noting in respect to the progress made against each improvement recommendation. However, I'm obviously happy to take any questions should members have any.
Any questions? I'd take that as none. So the recommendation is recommend that the progress made against each improvement recommendation detailed within the updated OAIP is noted. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Motion carried, Chairman.
Right, up agenda 20, emergency services collaboration in the Thames Valley, and that's Callum Bell.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. Some of you will recall we established a memorandum of understanding in 2015 with Berkshire and Oxfordshire Fire and Rescue Service to collaborate across the Thames Valley in the delivery of our fire control services. Following the introduction of the Policing and Crime Act in 2017, we entered into formal arrangements to further explore collaboration opportunities across the Thames Valley. In 2018, we established the Thames Valley Collaboration Board, which is made up of 5 key stakeholders: ourselves, Royal Berkshire and Oxfordshire Fire and Rescue Services, Thames Valley Police, and South Central Ambulance Service. The board oversees a programme of projects, all of which are managed and scrutinised through the various stages of an agreed governance structure. We've got the interoperability group, the executive board and the steering group, and you can see more detail of these in appendices A and B. The current projects we are working together on are operational alignment, which are policy, equipment, mobilising and training; fire protection, so it's the legislative compliance, specialist advice and cross-border working and the delivering of our fire protection duties and functions. We've got blue light estates, which is sharing sites such as that which we have seen at Broughton Fire Station, and it would be absolutely remiss of me not to mention the blue light hub at West Ashland, which is now live for us as an operational site and will be very, very soon with other partners which we're involved in, such as Thames Valley Police, South Central Ambulance Service, blood transportation and others. We've got the procurement support for the likes of appliances, operational equipment, personal protective equipment, and the savings for these can be seen in more detail on page 32 of your pack. Within the procurement sphere, we are the lead service on this area of work. We've got workforce reform, much of which you've heard about from Dave Whitelock earlier on, about apprenticeships, and our focus now is on on-call recruitment and retention, and Anna Collette is leading on that from Bucks Fire and Rescue Service for the Thames Valley collaboration work. You've heard mention earlier on in this meeting that COVID has caused a variety of impacts, direct or otherwise. However, it has not hindered nor prevented us to continue to collaborate in the current environment. And this brings me on to updating you all on a new project which has recently been approved by the board. Breathing apparatus sets. This is a major project to deliver the same BA set across the whole of the Thames Valley for all 3 fire and rescue services. And we have another fire and rescue service showing an interest in what we do and how we go about it. The response and recovery to COVID working with a variety of partners to deliver better outcomes to all our communities, delivering food parcels, medicines, PPE and training. So throughout the pandemic, from the early stages of it, when we first got involved in February, when we had members being repatriated back to Kents Hill, all the way through to here we are now, we have been actively involved in working with a broad spectrum of partners to delivering benefits across the whole of the Thames Valley. This has acted as a catalyst for us to refresh and further enhance our arrangements with all partners to better understand the changing community risks and how we can work in partnerships in the delivery of our community prevention programme. One other area of work we've gotten involved with in a collaboration framework, which you have been briefed on in the last few months, is around working with Oxfordshire and Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service, and we took the lead role in coordinating the provision of a number of volunteers from all 3 services to provide drivers to South Central Ambulance Service in support of their response to COVID. The detachment of these volunteers has now been paused. However, we are maintaining arrangement with SCAS to enable us to support them in the future should they need our assistance. I know we've mentioned earlier on, should there be a second wave, what does that look like? In Appendix D of your packs, you will see a letter of thanks from Will Hancock, the Chief Executive of SCAS, recognising our support to them. As Mark and others have intimated earlier, one of the things that the pandemic has shown to us is the ability of our staff to adapt and work differently and optimise the use of technology such as Microsoft 365 and the use of Teams, which we are using today. This will enhance our ability to collaborate more effectively across the Thames Valley and beyond. Exploring collaboration opportunities will not be limited to just our blue light partners, nor our neighbours. That summarises the paper I wish to bring to you for noting this afternoon. I'll happily take any questions if there are any.
Yeah, there's one from Councillor Stutsbury, please.
Firstly, thank you for the report, and I understand the reason collaborative working. If there's any decision to take this beyond what I call collaborative working to changing of management structure of the three services together for costs, clearly that would come back. And I also look forward to the day with this collaborative working when they realign your workers' wages as they used to be with police officers before it was removed. Historically, I reckon that'd be quite a positive. The pay scales be realigned if that's collaborative working. I think that'd be quite positive. But I am concerned because this is early days, and why we're all trying to save money and do things properly and work together. I would be really worried if there was somehow we ended up with a change in the management structure and the independence of all these people, because that is very valuable in public life.
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Councillor Stutsbury. If we were to look to explore the sharing of senior management and the functions within that sphere, we would absolutely bring that back to the authority for at the early stages for information and then for approval based upon our own requirement to consult on that, and that would be a larger piece of work. So to give you any assurance, should we look to explore that, we will. But we already have arrangements with our partners across the Thames Valley. For the example, should we have a major incident, we already have an arrangement with them to enable a senior officer within one of the other services to go to what would be the Gold Command Suite to cover that period before we actually arrived, should that suite be set up in a location closer to their own host service.
Okay, I've got another question. Thank you, Robin. Councillor Exton, please.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'd like to pick up on one of the statistics here. I'm on page 302, halfway down, and it mentions BFRS has purchased 12 appliances in 2019. Now, when we look at our statement of accounts and our map, it demonstrated that we had 36 appliances across the authority. So if we've purchased 12 in 2019, that's a third or 30-something% of our appliances. And can you enlighten me if I interpreted that correctly?
You have, and we have got a planned programme of replacing appliances through a collaborative approach. So as our existing fleets come towards the end of their life, we will look to replace them based on the current framework we've got, an arrangement we've got within the Thames Valley, so that we get the best value through that approach in terms of as part of that programme of replacement. That has come up for refresh and review in the coming months, and it's something that we are looking to continue to explore, to continue to deliver best value for the service.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'll put the recommendation. It's recommended that the progress of emergency services collaboration programme within the Thames Valley update be noted.
Agreed.
Okay with that?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We're moving on.
Carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 21 is a forward plan, and that's noted. Okay. I think we're on to item 22, which is the next meeting, the 11th of November. But can I say something very quickly? Thank you everybody for their support today. There's been lots of challenging which we need, and I look forward to working for you in the future. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, for getting through such a large agenda so quickly. You must have had a lot of practice at this.
No, genuinely, that's really well done.
I think Robin's going to say something. Don't let me down.
I was going to say everybody must have a safe journey home.
Thanks very much for that.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to terminate the webcast.
Well, that was good.